There you are. Those lights are bright. I can see you now. Awesome. How y'all doing this morning? You all right? Awesome. It's an awesome day today. I'm going to use awesome a lot because yesterday was off the chain for me. I hope y'all got out and enjoyed this nice weather because I love hot weather. And yesterday, I went to the golf course at 11 o'clock and left at 7:30 last night. That was like a day in heaven for me. It was awesome. Awesome, yeah. I only played 3 holes, but because I'm really not good at golf. No, I got to play with my daughter and my son-in-law. We had a great time. And then we're on 18, and my granddaughter, who's 13, the oldest one, called me and said, "Papa, what are you doing?" I said, "Well, I'm standing on the 18th tee at McCandless." And she says, "Well, me and Dad want to play golf." I'm like, "Okay." I said, "Well, go by the house and get Mama, and y'all come on and we'll play some more golf." So we played some more golf. We had a great time. Probably from about here to that wall, over some water, put 4 balls in the water in a row, and then decided that wasn't a shot for me. But hey, that's okay. We had a great time. Loved it. Like I said, I hope you got out and enjoyed God's world because He gave us a beautiful day yesterday to enjoy. And it was just great. Anyway, I am Tony, the associate pastor here at New Life Church, and we're very honored that you're here to worship with us today. Now, we're starting a new series today. It's called Moses, and we're going to be discussing for the next 8 weeks how God used Moses in his time. But here's the thing. God will use you today if you allow Him to. Now, the text we're going to be in will be Exodus chapter 2, 1 through 10. If you would, go ahead and turn there. And I will say this. Electronic devices are great. I use them all the time. But if you don't have one of these, a Bible that you can thumb through and just smell, that's God's Word. You're holding it in your hand. Get you one. And if you don't have one, please see our discipleship pastor, Pastor Eric. He'll be glad to give you one. I don't know that he'll give you his personal one, but he may. But he has Bibles for you if you don't have one. Get one. It's okay to use electronic devices. Don't get me wrong on that. I do it all the time, but it's just something about being able to spread that word out and look at it and mark your Bible up and write in there everything God's doing in your life right now. That's just awesome. So get you one. Now, anyway, by the mid-1930s, Hitler's Germany, began to a campaign to persecute, imprison, and kill Jews. Hitler blamed the Jews for many of Germany's problems. He used Darwin's evolutionary theory to justify what he claimed was the destruction of an inferior race. And as a result, many Jews experienced the looting of their homes, and they would be taken and put in cattle cars on trains, stuffed in there with their humanity stripped away from them, treated like animals, and shipped off to these concentration camps. And they would have thousands of them lined up in front of these mass graves, just shoulder to shoulder, and they would shoot them and kill them, and they would fall in this mass grave. And then, knowing what was going to happen, a next line, they would put them across in front of this mass grave and shoot them, and they would fall in, thousands of them. Then they would burn them, and others were gassed to death. And I read this, that there's estimated 1.5 million children died in the Holocaust. 1.5 million children. We have seen what can happen when a powerful government falls into the wrong hands. But there were some Christians during that day, like Corrie Ten Boom. You may have heard of her. Her and her family, they lived in Holland. They would take in Jews into their homes and keep them safe from the storm troopers at their own peril. But here's the thing. I want to ask you a question. What would you do? Would you have done that? I mean, would you say, "Hey, that's not my problem. I'm not Jewish. It has nothing to do with me. It just really don't matter to me"? Well, I believe she did the right thing. And eventually they were captured. Her whole family, and they were put into a concentration camp, and they were treated just like the Jews. They were beaten. But here's the thing. During this time of their life, not one of her family members died in a concentration camp. I believe God honored their heroic deeds of what they were doing. And she went on to reach millions of Jews with our Lord and Savior Jesus' saving message. Millions. We live in an evil world filled with sin and darkness, and as a result, we sometimes have to make difficult decisions, don't we? Well, it just so happens Moses' family, his parents had to make that same kind of decision. They already had 2 children, Miriam, who was most likely the oldest, and then Aaron, who was 3 years older than Moses was. But see, when Moses was born, Pharaoh had declared that all the male babies in the Hebrew, of the Israelites were to be destroyed. And, he wanted them cast into the river Nile, which was full of crocodiles. And they were to throw the babies in there, and the crocodiles would eat them. And this happened to thousands of children. They were forced into doing this. This was another attempt to limit the growth of the Hebrew population. Let me ask you a question. What if in America today we got up tomorrow morning and they said you need to kill your youngest child? Think about it. You need to kill your youngest child. What would you do? How would you react to that? I mean, the government is all powerful here, and if you didn't kill your youngest child, guess what would happen? They would kill you, your spouse, and all your other children. Well, this morning I want to share with you some things that should help you face a crisis in your life. Maybe you're not faced with the destruction of your youngest child. Or maybe you are faced with a life and death situation. Some of us in here have faced life and death situation. And here's some things that'll help you in that, but it'll also help you in other situations. See, there's forces at work in America today that want to destroy our nation's sovereignty. There truly is. There's actually people in the United States that believe today that we should select certain people and exterminate them. Look it up on the internet. It's real. It's really sad. But Satan is working very hard to destroy America. We're going to see that God worked in the time of Moses to deliver him for death and to prepare him to deliver his people from bondage. God had a plan for Moses' life, and he worked to save Moses. And he'll do the same for you. God has a plan for your life. You may not realize that. You may not believe that. You may be the person that's sitting there today saying, who am I? I don't have a purpose. God can't use me. I'm not smart enough. I'm not active enough. I'm not this. I'm not that. But remember this. God has a purpose for your life. Each and every one of you. And the first thing I want to encourage you with this morning is my first point, number 1. Trust God to grant prudence. Difficult time calls for difficult decisions. And when we have a difficult decision to make, you need wisdom, do you not? Here at New Life Church, we have an elder board that we as pastors can go to and glean wisdom from them. A lot of them are a whole lot smarter than I am, I promise you. And I have good news. Guess what? God promises to grant each and every one of us wisdom to enable us to make the right choice, to make the right decision and be on the right path that he needs us on. He tells us that in James 1:5, where it says, if any of you lack wisdom, you should ask God. How much simpler could it be? Hello? Ask God for wisdom, and he will give it to you. It goes on to say, he gives generously to all without finding fault, and it will be given to you. Now, in the story this morning, we have a serious situation here. A baby is being threatened. As we've already mentioned, there's a very powerful king that had decreed that all male babies would be thrown into the river. What was his mother going to do? She had a difficult decision to make. If she didn't obey, if she disobeyed Pharaoh, what's going to happen? Well, imprisonment, for sure. Execution for her and her whole family, most likely. She knew she had to save this child. But what? What do I do? God gave her wisdom to know what to do. So when you face life and death situations or any serious situation in your life, trust God to grant you the wisdom you need to make the decision you need to make. And in this story, Moses' mother teaches us the following, and it's the A part under number 1, is we should hide the innocent from their destroyers. We can't allow any innocent life to be destroyed if we can help it. I hope you believe that. One thing that we can do is hide them. And we read in verse 2 of Exodus chapter 2, it says, "And when she saw that he was beautiful, a beautiful child, she hid him for 3 months." This was an act of faith that she hid this child for 3 months. She trusted in God that God would keep him hid and safe. We read that in the New Testament in Hebrews 11:23. It says, by faith, did you get that? By faith, Moses' parents hid him for 3 months after he was born because they saw he was no ordinary child. And they were not afraid of the king's edict. Let me say this right now. What you have to understand, his parents were born into slavery. They were slaves. That's the only life they knew. The king was their master, okay? Whatever he said, they did. Whatever the people that were over them said, they did. For them to hide this child and to go against this king, God give them this faith. God give them this strength. This is the strength God will give you, the same strength He gave Moses' parents to stand up against evil. You know, as I mentioned earlier, Corrie Ten Boom and her family hid many Jews in their homes, you know, to protect them from imprisonment and from death. And likewise, Rahab hid the Jewish spies that came, you know, to the promised land to spy. She hid them and saved their lives, which also led to her life being saved. You can read about that in Joshua 2. And according to 1 Kings 18:4, King Ahab's steward, Jobadiah, he hid 100 prophets in 2 caves, fed them bread and water to keep them alive and safe, to keep them away from Queen Jezebel. It's what you do. It's what they did. They protected these people from the people that wanted to destroy them. And even God used this method. In Psalms 27:5, it says, "For in the time of trouble, He shall hide me in His pavilion. In the sacred place of His tabernacle, He should hide me." You know, so there's nothing wrong with this method of saving people. You know, God expects us to use common sense. You know that thing, common sense, that we have? God wants us to use that. You know, Moses' mother also teaches us that we can stand against the ungodly demands of this world. There's so many things in your life today, think about your day-to-day busy schedule, that pulls you away from God. There really is. There's so many things that keep you from spending time with God that you put in a higher priority than God in your life. And I don't want to see a show of hands. You and God know what I'm talking about in your life. There's so many things there that keep you from His plan He has for you in your life. God teaches us to stand against those things, to stand against what's right in a time of darkness. in a sinful world. God will give you the strength to do that, just like he did Moses' parents, if you ask him. All you have to do is ask. Take time. And I don't want to see a show of hands. I want y'all to think about this. How many of you give God 10 minutes of your undivided attention a day? Just 10 minutes. I mean, think about that. That's not very much time out of your day, is it? Just 10 minutes. The second thing Moses' mother teaches us to do as God is granting us prudence is to take other necessary steps to save lives. You see, a newborn baby sleeps a lot, and they're kind of quiet at first, for a little while. Then they start getting a little older. And guess what happens? They start crying a lot and more and louder and louder. And I've experienced this with my children and grandchildren, as many of you have as well. Our student pastor, Trey, and his wife have about a 3-month-old now. And I'm sure Kate gets really loud at times. But by this time, Moses, was 3 months old, and he was getting very loud. And in Exodus chapter 2, verse 3, we read, "But when she could hide him no longer," that means the kid was screaming his head off, most likely, she got a papyrus basket for him and coated it with tar and pitch. Then she placed the child in it and put it among the reeds along the bank of the Nile. I mean, think about this first. I want you to think about this. She put the baby where the crocodiles were. Keep that in your head. Moses' mother would have been foolish to keep the baby in the house because he's making all this noise, all right? And because these soldiers, this is not their house. This is a place where they live, where they stay, but it's not their house. They didn't have any rights. They're slaves. These soldiers would storm in at any time, And if a baby starts crying and a soldier storms in, what's going to happen? Oh, that's a baby boy. Let's kill him and his parents right now. So, what she had to do is to come up with another plan, a wise plan. So what did Pharaoh say? He goes, place the baby boys in the river. So what did she say? She goes, I'm going to put him in the river. That's what I was told to do. But I'm going to put him in an ark. And I'm going to provide a cover for him to keep him safe, from the sun and from the elements. And I believe it's very significant that this basket was called an ark as well in our text. You see, this word ark is used one other place in our Bible. And that's where they talk about Noah's ark. And what was Noah's ark used for? It was to provide safety for lives. This little ark was used the same way. It was there to keep Moses safe and to keep him alive. But here's the thing we have to understand. God's given us an ark for eternity. That's Jesus Christ. You ever thought of it that way? Jesus Christ is your ark. He's there to protect you. He's there to save you. All you have to do is ask. Now, this little ark that Moses was in wasn't going to last forever, The baby would still need to be rescued but the mother, she had done all that she could do at this point. She just placed Moses in God's hands. She said, here's my baby. I can't do anything else. You have to do this. That, too, was an act of faith. She believed that God would direct a compassionate person to find her baby and to save him from death in this river. Because remember what I said earlier? This is where the crocodiles were. All right? Moses' mother didn't focus on the human predicament she was in. Instead, she kept her eyes on God. Let me ask you a question today. When something comes up in your life, who do you look to first? Do you look to God Do you go to prayer? Do you hit your knees? Or do you call your friend? Can you believe what they did? Can you believe what's happening to me in my life? Can you believe what God's allowing to happen to me? What do you do first? There's another application in this verse that I need to point out today. And it's hard for a lot of people to hear. It really is. As parents, we should do everything in our strength to protect our children. We really should. But there comes a time when it's time to place them in God's hands. And I'm telling you, today in America, it's very sad. There's so many adult children that don't know how to take care of themselves because their parents continue to make decisions for them. Parents continue to stand in the way of God's design. That's what you're doing. Proverbs 22:6 says, train a child in the ways that they should go, and in time they will return to it. You are a steward of that child. That child is a gift to you. That child belongs to God, not you. My dad used to tell me all the time, and so did my mom, I brought you into this world, I'll take you out. That is a lie. They may take me out, but they didn't bring me into this world. God used them as a tool to bring me into this world. God brought me into this world, just like He did you. You need to remember that. I'm very passionate about this because we're destroying our children, our adult children, by giving them things they don't need. We're doing things for our adult children we don't need to do. I'm not saying if they're having a hard time, if there's something very difficult in their life going on, that we don't need to help them. But guess what? When your child was small, they would run and fall and scrape their knee, did they not? What did you do? You'd go pick them up and put some Neosporin on it, put a Band-Aid on it, maybe kiss their boo-boo. It's all better now. Guess what you need to do with your children when they get a little bit older? Is let them scrape their knee and fix it themselves. How did you learn the things you learned in life? Because I promise you, most of you sitting here, there's a few of you that did listen to everything Mom and Daddy told you to do, but there's a few of you hard-headed like me. You had to learn the hard way. And once you learn it, when Mama said that burner's hot, you went, oh yeah, that's hot. You learned not to do that no more, didn't you? Let them learn. It's okay. I'm not saying let them live in poverty. Let them be, let them think you don't love them. I'm not saying that at all. But let them make mistakes. Let them learn to trust God. If you want to tell your children something, point them towards God. Say, hey, I've been through this, but you're not going to listen to me. You might need to go talk to God about it. Try that. Let Him help them. And I promise you, when they get a little bit older and they make a few mistakes, they will come back and say, hey, I appreciate that. Thank you for doing that. I've not always been the best parent and the right parent, but I've had two of my children now that they're quite a bit older. My boys are almost 40. I'm an old guy. My daughter's in her late 20s. And I've had two of my children come back and say, hey, Dad, thanks for letting me do whatever it was at that time, because that taught me not to do this. And I'm not perfect. I'm not saying that, but give your kids a fighting chance in life. It takes faith to take that child and lay them in God's hands and say, there it is, and walk away. It's hard. It's oh so hard. But I promise you, in the long run, they'll be better off for it. You'll be better off for it, and our world will be better off for it. That brings me to the second thing, is trust God to grant protection. Trust God to grant protection. Perhaps the main point of this story is to show how God works to protect Moses' life. this story also shows one way God protects us, and that is by his providence. You know, the providence of God simply means that God created this world. He made this world. He's the ruler of this world. And guess what? He controls every circumstance in life to accomplish his purpose. Now, I'm not taking free will out of that. That's not what I'm saying at all. Don't miss what I'm saying here. God can make changes in people's life. That doesn't mean that they're always going to listen to him. Hello? Because I promise you, I did not always listen to God. I'm the kid that kept touching the hot burner, going, oh, that hurts, oh, that hurts, oh, that hurts. Yeah, you're stupid. Quit doing it. Okay? I'm that kid. That's free will. What I'm talking about here is people that listen to that still, quiet voice of God in your head and in your heart. That's what I'm talking about. I believe that God had called Moses from the womb to deliver his children from Egypt. He was not going to let Pharaoh destroy Moses. So I want you to notice in our text here how God's providentially worked to protect baby Moses from death. You know, here are 4 things that God used to protect Moses. And just think about these things. It's a sub-point under number 2. The first one, A, is God used a baby's continence. You know, we read, remember in verse 2 where it says, and when she saw that he was a beautiful child, she hid him for 3 months. You know, in the providence of God, you know, Moses was an unusually beautiful baby. You know, he was just so good looking. And the word translated here, and I'm going to try to say this word for beautiful, it's Bowiji, which means good, pleasing, agreeable to the senses. Moses was a good-looking kid. He was better looking than the other kids. Come on now. Every mother thinks their child is the most beautiful child out there, and they should. If you don't think your child's the most beautiful child out there, you don't need to be a mama. That's just the truth. I mean, come on. God give you a miracle, a blessing when he give you those children. All right? Treat them that way. They are beautiful. You know, sometimes, you know, I think Moses' mother may have been just looking down at this little infant. He was gazing into her eyes. She was gazing into his eyes. And somehow, this lady that was born into a slave's life and had no hope for anything got a dim hope from somewhere. What a hope it is when you look at a newborn baby. Do you know what I'm talking about? You look at that little infant. There's hope there. One of God's miracles, the hope of a better life, the hope of security, the hope of love, the hope of peace, the hope of change. Because we all want this for our children, a better life. We want things to change and be better for them. That hope was there in Moses' mother's mind. Moses' mother faced a difficult choice. She could give her child up for adoption, or she could risk death. She chose what she necessarily needed to do was give her son up. So I believe she took the steps of hope, hoping that someone would find her baby and adopt him. You know, young mothers all over the world today and here in Stanley County have to make that choice. Especially here in America, they have the choice of abortion. It's very wrong to take innocent life. I believe abortion is wrong. There's many young girls out there and young women that face that. We were in Haiti at GLA. That's God's Littlest Angels. It's an orphanage in Haiti. And they were telling us horrendous stories of how they got some of the infants. We were in the infants ward. And they had a lot of babies there. I don't remember the exact number, but there was a lot of them. And one of the girls was telling us that some of them were found in dumpsters. Some of them were found just on the street in a basket. People just walking by, the babies sitting there crying. Some of them were left at hospitals. Some of them were brought to the gates of GLA and just left there, and they walked away from these miracles of God. But here's something I want y'all to understand. In all these instances I'm talking about with these young ladies, some of them made the wrong choice that put them in this situation. But who gives us the right to condemn them? Who gives us the right to not love them and have compassion on them? Because God does. One of the things we have to remember is we have all sinned and fall short of the glory of God. Everyone in this room, I don't care who you are, you sin. And it's by God's grace, by God's mercy, and God's love that will conquer all. Everything. Because one thing I don't want you to forget, if you're a Christian, if you claim that Jesus lives inside you, that same love, mercy, and grace was afforded to you. Can you not pass that on to someone else who's suffering? We have a world full of suffering people that are hurting and scared to say something. And we see it every day and walk right past it. Have compassion. That's another human being. That's another one of God's chosen one. Do you know that we're God's chosen? Did you know that? He didn't choose dogs or hippopotamus or a giraffe. He chose human beings. Reach out to them. The B part of this, how God protected baby Moses, was a woman's curiosity. You know, when Pharaoh's daughter came to the river, she says in verse 5 there that she's seen the ark among the reeds. Well, think about this. Has any of y'all ever been on a boat, you know, where you could just lay down and relax? I have. You know, the boat's just gently rocking and just sleeping. Oh, man, that would be so good. There in the reeds. You know, that's where baby Moses was. No doubt her curiosity was awakened in her when she seen this little ark there, you know, nestled in these reeds, just gently rocking. And I think that she said, oh, look. She sent her slave girl out there to get it. She says, go get that for me. I want to see what's in there. Here's something you got to remember. Her slave girl is Moses' sister. Is that not cool? God's got a plan. Hello. He's got people in place. She goes out and she gets it and she brings it back. And you know, I'm just thinking that his daughter's like just mulling in her mind. What is in there? What's going on? I got to see what's in there. So she gets it and immediately she takes it and she lifts it up, the cover, because Moses' mother put a cover on it, and she sees, oh no, that's a Hebrew baby boy. Oh, my dad said all of those have to be killed. But in God's, he providentially stepped in. And she said, oh, I can't do that. I can't destroy this little innocent. And her curiosity, she kept that child. But there's another thing that came into play here. The C part of this is a baby's cry. Remember how I told you that he's just there just rocking away and sleeping and he's all nestled? Well, his sister Miriam went and got him, brought him out. It kind of might have startled him a little bit. Because you got to think about this. What have those crocodiles been eating here lately? Crying babies. So God was probably rocking Moses. I don't know this at all. I'm just making this part up. God's rocking Moses, keeping him nice and comfortable to keep him quiet so the crocodiles don't go, ooh, there's lunch. And then his sister goes and gets him, Miriam, brings him up there. And then she rips this cover off, and maybe the sunlight shined in. Or maybe God reached down and pinched him, said, Moses, wake up and start crying. We don't know. God can do what he wants to. Can he not? It was a baby's cry that led to the next thing that worked to protect Moses, and that's a woman's compassion. A woman's compassion. I believe God made women to hear babies cry. I mean, do you agree with that? God made women to hear babies cry. I'm going to tell you, when my daughter Chelsea was born, she cried a lot, okay? All night long sometimes. I'm going to tell you, one of us got to sleep and the other one had to get up with the baby. I had to get up every night with that child. No, that's a lie. Man, I never heard her once, and that's the truth. My wife would get up every time unless she kicked my butt out of the bed, you know. But I believe, you know, that this woman heard this baby cry and responded to that. And I'm not surprised at all that it says at the end of verse 6 there that she had compassion on him. Because here's what God did. He brought two things God made, a baby's cry and a woman's heart, and he brought them together because of her compassion. Pharaoh's daughter was moved to compassion to save this little one in spite of what her father said. But see, compassion has a way of conquering pride of race and pride of social class. And Moses was a good-looking baby too. You remember that part? So that probably had a little bit to do with it. You know, she's got him like, ooh, look at that good-looking kid. I need to have that because my babies are ugly, but I want this one. I don't know what she said. You know, if we allow our God-given compassion to work in our hearts, it'll tear down those preconceived notions we have about people. We'll respond to the cries of a hurting and dying world that's all around us, not recognizing race or social class. Are you willing to adopt a child? Are you willing to be a foster family for a child? Are you willing to reach out to a hurting and dying world in need of help? Are you willing to be God's hands and feet? I want you to think back in your life at some time where God protected you. Even when you weren't a believer. Even when you were doing everything you could to hurt everyone around you. Even when you rejected Jesus Christ, God protected you. Think about that. Do you know why? God has a purpose for you. You were born for a reason. And it wasn't to have a big house, fancy cars, and a whole bunch of money in the bank. That's not what God made you for, contrary to what our society tells us. God made you for His purpose. We've seen that in difficult times that we should trust God to give us prudence. We should trust God to give us protection. But the third thing we should do is we should also trust God to grant us provision. You see, this story is a good example of how God provides for His people. Moses, in his family, illustrates two ways that God provides for His people. And one of the first things is, a subpoint under this is, God provides nourishment. It's fine that Pharaoh's daughter, found Moses and had compassion on him and, got him out of the water and stuff. But here's the thing you got to remember. She couldn't feed him. Back then you didn't run down to Walmart and get a can of formula and some baby bottles. That wasn't happening. So she couldn't feed this child at all. And she couldn't give him any nourishment. She needed another woman who was capable of doing that. And guess what? God's got a plan. God's got people in place who are listening and obeying Him. And God had the right woman for the job. In verses 7 through 9 in Exodus chapter 2, it tells us, it says, "Then his sister asked Pharaoh's daughter, his sister being Miriam, this is Moses' sister, asked Pharaoh's daughter, shall I go and get one of the Hebrew women to nurse the baby for you? Hello? God's got a plan, got people in place. They're following God's plan. They're not deviating from it. They're listening to what he says in their head. And it goes on to say, yes, go, she answered. So the girl went and got the baby's mother. Just a second, can you imagine this? Miriam, a slave girl, the Pharaoh, of Pharaoh's daughter. She's running as fast as she can to get to Mama's house. I mean, putting blisters on her feet to get there. Busts open the door and goes, Mom, guess what? Come with me, quick, hurry. Says, I got something. Moses needs you. Come. She's probably so excited she didn't know what to say. And they run back there, and it goes on in verse 9 to say, Pharaoh's daughter said to her, take this baby and nurse him for me, and I'll pay you. Hello? God's got a plan. God's got people in place. They're listening. Can you imagine how excited this woman was? It goes on to say, so the woman took the baby and nursed him. Wow. Not only did God save Moses from death, but he used Pharaoh's daughter to make a difference. She listened to a slave girl. Think about what a slave is. Do you think their master is really going to listen to them? God put this in this lady's head to listen to this slave girl, what she was saying. Then she got Moses' own mother to nurse him. Is that not amazing? God not only provided for Moses, but he provided for his family as well. What we have to realize here is a lot of people in church, a lot of so-called Christians have in their mind that God will only use Christian people. This lady is definitely not a Christian. What we have to remember is God can use anybody, anywhere, anytime to do anything for his glory. Doesn't matter who you are or what you've done. He used this non-Christian woman to make a difference in Moses' life and to fulfill God's prophecy, his will for Moses' life. He used this woman. And not only that, Pharaoh's daughter paid this woman to nurse her own child. Man, that's a twofer in my eyes. That's a great deal, is it not? Come on, people. This is awesome. That's the kind of things God do. Our God does for us as his children if we'll listen to what he wants. Back when I was a volunteer pastor here at New Life, when I first started, I had a pretty decent job and made pretty decent money, and I lost my job. And I was devastated. And the short version is God used a man who's probably smoked more marijuana than will fit in this room and done more bad things in his life than any of us all put together have done to make a difference in my life. Just out of the blue, the guy called me up. He's a contractor that I used sometimes. And he calls me up and he goes, what are you doing, man? And I told him the story, what happened. He says, I'll pick you up in the morning. That's God. God was taking care of me. He not only did that, I got in the truck the next morning and I was all downhearted. And he looked at me and he goes, hey, man. He says, don't worry about nothing. He says, even if I have to pay your bills, you will not lose anything. He never did have to pay our bills because God provided. God has a plan. That put me on the track to being here today. Because at that time, I had no desire to be here today. But God used him to push me in this direction. God has a plan. He'll use anybody to fulfill that plan. And the B part of this is God will provide preparation for our life's work. You know, God saved Moses because he had a special plan for his life. He delivered God's people from bondage. That was Moses' job. That's what he was supposed to do. He knew that one day Moses would stand face to face with the most powerful man on earth at that time, Pharaoh. And he knew that he had to prepare him for that. So what did he do? Well, Pharaoh's daughter adopted Moses. And what happened there? He lived in a palace. He had the best education that Egypt could offer him. It tells us that in Acts 7:22. It says, Moses was educated in all the wisdom of the Egyptian and was powerful in speech and action. Through this education that he received, he was able to do what God had called him to do. See, there's a striking antithesis here. He was the child of a slave, yet he became the son of a queen. He was born in a hut, yet he lived in a palace. He inherited poverty, and he enjoyed unlimited wealth. This is an illustration of Job 5:13, where it says, he, talking about God, he catches the wise in their craftiness, and the schemes of the wily are swept away. Pharaoh proposed to deal shadily with the Israelites. But here's what happened. In the end, God worked it all out. What Pharaoh did was he gave Moses food, he gave him lodging, and he gave him an education to the very man who accomplished the very thing Pharaoh was trying to prevent. Do you see that? Moses' mother trusted God to give her prudence. She trusted God to protect her and her child. She trusted God to provide for her and her family. God will do the same thing for you. I don't know what you're going through right now. Each and every one of us is going through something in our life right now. I don't know what you're really going through unless you've talked to me. But I do know this. If you'll keep your eyes on God, stay focused on Him, be obedient to what He's asked you to do. Because I promise you, He's asked you to do something if you've listened or not. Okay? If you're listening or not. You were born for a reason. You're not just here on this earth by happenstance. You're here for a purpose and a reason. God wants you. And He wants you to fulfill your purpose for Him.